and capitalism as an idea from an objectivist standpoint. And that encapsulates the general principles of objectivism, the general completion of the philosophy from a very basic standpoint. And there are just a few additional topics I want to run through just to give you an idea of where objectivism stands on them, because people find these things interesting, I find. So the first one is on God. Objectivism agrees with atheism, who say that there is no God. And there's a quote here from Peikoff on that, and he says, "Every argument for God and an attribute ascribed to him rests on a false metaphysical premise. None can survive for a moment on a correct metaphysics. For instance, God is infinite. Nothing can be infinite according to the law of identity. Everything is what it is and nothing else. It is limited in its qualities and in its quantity. It is this much and no more. Infinite as applied to quantity does not mean very large. It means larger than any specific quantity. That means no specific quantity, i.e. a quantity without identity. This is prohibited by the law of identity." And that's simply an example. That's not conclusive evidence, obviously, against God, but that's just to show how objectivism treats the concept of God, because it shows that in arguments, objectivists say, well, I need a concrete identity. I need not a negation, but an affirmation of what it is. So objectivism holds that atheism is true. That it is good to not believe in God. The second point to make is about political ideology. Now, the standing assumption among most people is that objectivists are either Republicans or conservatives. And this is absolutely and utterly false. And so you may look at me and say, so does that mean they're Democrats? And again, this is absolutely and utterly false. So instead, we can say that it simply disagrees with both of them. It says that they're both wrong. For different reasons, of course, but it does say that they are both wrong. So let's look at some literature on that real quick. It says, today's politics don't even question we need more controls. They simply fight over which control should come next. The liberals, for instance, tell us we need more and more controls, economic controls, but let's not have spiritual or moral controls. Then the conservatives say, no, we need economic freedom, but we need more controls over thought. We need to legislate against obscenities, we have to legislate against abortion, we have to mandate prayers in schools, we have to teach creation as on par with the theory of evolution. The conservatives are actually worse from this point of view of injecting government into intellectual, ideological matters and trying to mandate a viewpoint down the throats of helpless young students. Interesting use of words, I know. But that comes from Peikoff again. So what are objectivists? If we can describe the political ideology of objectivists, what would it be? And the answer is they are radicals for capitalism. So the next quote says, "We are radicals for capitalism. We are fighting for that philosophical base which capitalism did not have and without which it was doomed to perish." And to say something is radical says we need to just go back to the fundamental root of something and get to the source of the problem. It says that when capitalism came into being in the United States in particular, it didn't really have a good philosophical system to support it, which is why we've seen it slowly but surely go away into a more and more mixed economy. Also, I didn't put this in the outline, but I will say that objectivists also distinguish themselves from libertarians, the Libertarian Party, because the common argument is that libertarians don't have a good sense of morality in a lot of ways and disagree in a lot of moral principles. For example, libertarians are actually often associated with atheism. I'm sorry, not atheism, that's not right. It's often associated with anarchy is the word I'm looking for. But obviously, objectivism says, no. We like the police. We need people to protect us whenever somebody tries to force us. That's good. So it disagrees with libertarians on a number of things. So it's easiest to just think of objectivism as a philosophy and the political ideology simply being capitalism. Then we have aesthetics, and I'm not going to read the quote on this, I'm just going to try and wrap up a little bit faster. From an aesthetic point of view, Objectivism values romanticism. It believes that good art is art which represents what can be and what should be, not something that is not possible. It's not to say that art can't be made, but that the best art, the good art that Objectivists like, is what can be and what should be, the romantic idea. However, I will tone that down by saying that Rand herself, in her later years, said that there's a lot to study left about aesthetics and about how to deal with aesthetics in the world. Then we have the benevolent universe principle. And again, I'm not going to go through all the quotes here to try and wrap up a little faster. But interesting idea here is as follows. In life, Objectivists hold that we should not come to expect problems. We should not expect suffering. We should not live our lives in fear all of the time. Objectivism says no, the natural state is goodness, is happiness, is flourishing. That is the natural state. And when something takes us from that natural state, then what we simply should do is act to go back to the natural state as quickly as possible and not dwell on the problems. Right? You don't hold long grudges and spend the rest of your life, taking revenge and all that. No, you live to be happy. Okay, the life is meant to be happy, live to be happy, and don't focus on fear, pain, and suffering in the world. On love and relationships. Objectivism talks about love and relationships a bit. It says that with regards to relationships between people, there's an interesting disconnect when it comes to what we want from somebody else. And the point here is on loneliness versus fear. Okay, often people will feel lonely, and that's an understandable sort of emotion to have. But the problem that we run into is that when we feel lonely, we may or may not act rationally, because the emotion should not necessarily lead us to a particular action. We should probably step back and think about it a little bit more. Because we may not be dealing simply out of loneliness, but instead out of fear. To give you an idea of how I'm distinguishing, I will read this quote. So let's look at that. It's on the last page. The thinking child is not antisocial. He is in fact the only type of child fit for social relationships. When he develops his first values and conscious convictions, particularly as he approaches adolescence, he feels an intense desire to share them with a friend who would understand him. If frustrated, he feels an acute sense of loneliness. Loneliness is specifically the experience of this type of child or adult. It is the experience of those who have something to offer. The emotion that drives conformists to belong is not loneliness, but fear. The fear of intellectual independence and responsibility. The thinking child seeks equals. The conformist seeks protectors. So it says that, in other words, don't conform simply to conform. It's understandable if you are lonely, but it is important that you stick to your values and thus to your virtues. With regards to romantic love, love is certainly important in life. It is a value in life. But value, like all values, they come from, back in the roots, epistemology and metaphysics. So we say that love can come from the heart, but it's not just an emotion. It is something that should be validated also by reason. In other words, if you love somebody and that person tells you, well, if you love me, go jump off that cliff, that's probably not a good idea, right? You should have some validation in there and not just blindly follow love without your reason. And that's the essence of what the quote is telling you. I'll let you come back to that quote at your leisure to read it. So we still need a philosophy, but it does also say that when we have a philosophy that matches with somebody and that person has that natural kind of emotional response and you get those together, that's good stuff. I like it. It works well. So in conclusion, all of this stuff, what's the whole point of objectivism? Why